Hey, everybody, welcome to the Soul Report. It's great to have you back with us here today. This is your host, Douglas James Cottrell, and we're looking here to talk to a very exciting guest today, Cindy Lora-Renard, who's going to talk all about her work in A Course of Miracles. And of the several books she's written, she's going to talk a little bit about that as well. Here on the Soul Report, we bring you conversations with the most thought-provoking motivational speakers, spiritual leaders, skilled therapists, intriguing personalities, and remarkable people that we can find throughout the world. So whether you're seeking a spark of inspiration or deep transformational wisdom, hey, you're in the right place. Okay, let's get started and discover the souls that are shaping our world. Welcome to the show, Cindy. It's great to have you here today. You know, we've heard great things about you. You are a well-published author, and so everybody wants to know. But they've heard the Course in Miracles, and they've heard about the wisdoms that started the revolution back in the day. But here you are, you're teaching and doing consultations about this. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this amazing field.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me on. And yeah, I got started in spirituality in general back in the early 90s when I was having a lot of mystical experiences.
What
And
kind of what kind of experiences?
out of body experiences,
Yeah.
psychic experiences where I would find myself being able to tap in to people's energy. Uh,
And you
yeah,
would
and I
know
was
things about them and things like that.
Sometimes it was very minimal at first, very minimal at first, and I wouldn't even necessarily call myself a clairvoyant, but I was opening up more at the time, and it got me really interested in exploring more spiritual material.
Well, that would do it if you're having an out-of-body experience. It's like, holy moly, what happened? Here I am. So,
I'm here, and there's another reality here. What's going on? And that really piqued my interest
so,
more.
so
Yeah.
what did you do? Just jump in both feet and try to find out everything about the spiritual world all at once, like most
I
everybody else does?
I did exactly that. I was in what a lot of people might describe as the spiritual buffet line. I would read, any book I could get my hands on that had to do with psychic phenomena, near-death experiences, even ET phenomena,
Wow.
all kinds of things. This is back in the 90s, and I was just exploring everything at the time before I found A Course in Miracles. So I found A Course in Miracles um, at a local bookstore I would go to often, and I would always go to the metaphysical section of the bookstore. I would always see this big giant blue book on the shelf, and I would take it off the shelf. This happened a dozen times, and I would open the first couple pages and look at the first three lines, which says, "Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God." And I was always intrigued by those lines, but I didn't know really what it meant at the time. And I'd flip through the pages and it just was like in another language to me. And I was like, but I was so intrigued by it. And I kept taking the book off the shelf, putting it back on the shelf again, never bought it until finally I decided I'm just going to buy the book. And it wasn't until a couple years after that, because I put the book on my shelf for a couple years, my mother started going to meetings, to Course in Miracles meetings. And she started sharing the lessons with me. And I got really interested again in the book. Um, and then she brought home another book called The Disappearance of the Universe by my husband, Gary Renard, and which is also all about A Course in Miracles. And I read that and it resonated with me so much that it got me really, that truly got me on the path of starting to actually study and do the workbook of A Course in Miracles, because it has a workbook that you do, has 365 lessons, one for every day of the year, that helps one to reverse their thinking and undo the ego, what it calls the ego, the part of the self that is identified with the physical world, with the body. Um, and I just that started to become my path. I knew that was the path I was meant to follow.
Well, obviously you were attracted to the bookstore, big blue book.
Yes.
Mommy
Yeah,
was talking about these things, and you had these amazing experiences opening up or becoming, waked up, if you will. Uh,
yeah,
so some people don't know about the Course of Miracles, and you've alluded to it in several different ways that many of us in the field have know about. So for the audience that might not know too much about that, in a summary, what would you describe the Course of Miracles, um, I guess, information? How would you describe that?
yeah. It's like a spiritual psychology that helps one to get in touch with their internal teacher, which the Course calls the Holy Spirit, and helps one to undo the false self that's identified with separation, which they calls the ego, and to start identifying and accepting your reality, which is spirit. And it's a purely non-dualistic thought system, which means that in a purely non-dualistic thought system, it means there's only one thing that's true. That's God, which is perfect love. Only the universe of God, the kingdom of God would be real, and everything else that can shift or change or take on a form of any kind that's not in this perfect oneness of God would be an illusion, would be what the Course calls like a dream, like we're dreaming a dream that we're
Mhm.
separate from God. But the reality is God is, it says, and we cease to speak because there's nothing else to say or do, because that's the only thing that's real. And we just somehow bought into this, what it calls a tiny mad idea, thought of separation, that we could be separate from God, or whatever you want to call God is fine. And we felt, the Course describes it as a process by which where we felt guilty. A part of the mind that felt it's separated from God felt guilty that it's separated. And so it felt that it needed to project and get rid of this guilt, because it projected its own idea onto God, that now God is angry at us for separating from him, which is a false idea, and is now going to punish us for this quote sin, this idea of this sin, which is not true. There is
Mhm.
no sin, the Course says. There's only a belief um, in sin. But sin is just the idea of separation, that we believe that we're separate from God. So the Course describes this process where in spirit, which is where we still are, we had this thought that we could be separate, and that produced some guilt in the mind, and then fear of God, that he's going to come and punish us for that. So what do we do with that guilt? Well, it's so unbearable. We, as one mind, hurl out, project that guilt out. And that's the Course's version of the Big Bang. What made this whole universe of time and space is actually says it's based on a thought of guilt, a thought of separation. That's why everything we see here is based on separation. And so it helps us to undo and reverse that idea that we're really these awful beings and we did something terrible, which isn't true. We're still at home in God, dreaming that we're here. It says, you're at home in God, dreaming of exile, but perfectly capable of awakening to reality. And A Course in Miracles is it's a channeled document, channeled through a woman named Helen Schuckman, who heard the voice she heard, and she wasn't religious, which makes this very interesting. Um, she was actually uh, uncertain about God and not sure what to make of the idea of God. So this was very interesting that this document was channeled through her because the voice described himself as Jesus to her. So
Mm.
Jesus is the voice of A Course in Miracles, channeled through a woman named Helen Schuckman, and he wanted to give us this course to tweak, I could say, tweak and reframe some of the false ideas we have made up about what he was really teaching 2,000 years ago. And he was a mystic, a mystical being, and he understood that God was the only reality. And he understood that the world we see is a false world. Not that we can't have a happy experience here and happy dream and you can live your normal lives and all of that, But he knew that there was, and this is what he's teaching in the course, that this was the false world and it was like a dream that we're all going to awaken from. And he goes on to say things like even the crucifixion was misinterpreted. I know it's a big statement to make, but he was sort of coming to correct some of these false ideas people projected onto him, such as he suffered on the cross. When there's no guilt in the mind, he says, you can't suffer. He didn't have any guilt anymore in the mind. When he was enlightened, when you're enlightened, the guilt vanishes and you can't feel any pain. So that's one of the big kind of ideas he talks about in the course is correcting some of our perceptions about him and about what he was really trying to teach 2,000 years ago. So
I know
this,
the Course in Miracles was a revolutionary uh, publication when it first came out, and Shirley MacLaine had been propagating, channeling and information coming. And this is quite a book. It's not a book; it's a series of books, actually, as I remember it. And obviously, for yourself, this is what can we say? Just like I can feel your enthusiasm in talking about God, and it is remarkable that this information has come through, channeled from a divine being, and being able to say or correct or direct or guide or help people understand some of the basic problems with religion, which is religion, generally speaking, is fear-based. If you're not good, you're going to go to hell, or terrible things are going to happen to you. In a metaphysical, mystical Christ, there is this idea of making mistakes, sinning, or accountability. So if you know better and you do it, well, you're in trouble. But if you don't know better and you make a mistake, well, I can see where this, it's not feeling guilty is or was put forward back then, a revolutionary idea. So here you are today, having studied, sounds like intensely studied in the Course of Miracles. Tell us, what are you doing to put this out to people? How are you helping in your own way today?
yeah, I teach online classes on the course, bi-monthly classes. They're 2 hours each, two-hour classes. I teach with my husband every month. We talk about different themes from A Course in Miracles.
Mhm.
I've written 4 books based on the course. The first one's called A Course in Health and Well-Being. I talk about what is health really? A lot of times we go right to the body. If the body is well, that means we're healthy. But what about the mind? I go to the level of the mind, and so we don't forget that the mind is what is the creator, in the sense that we decide in our minds, you know, how we want to feel. It always starts in other words, mind is cause and the world is the effect, and that includes our body. It's the effect.
Mhm.
And I talk about that in my book, A Course in Health and Well-Being. And I talk about the level of the mind and what it means to be healthy at the level of the mind, and how that can then manifest through, though, the body. And then I have book 2, which is the business of forgiveness, because one of the key themes in the course is how to practice true forgiveness, which is not the same kind of forgiveness the world traditionally thinks of. This is the kind of forgiveness Jesus was really teaching.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because, you're right on the money. I mean, people don't know about forgiveness. There are several different ways to forgive, and one of the things you might be asked sometime is like, well, that's a really bad person over there. They did some really bad things. Should I
Right.
forgive them and kind of just like it didn't happen? And I'm of the opinion saying, no, you do not forgive them in a naive way. You kind of stay away from them because they're really bad energy, they're bad people, but somehow you can maybe work your way around from not what we could call being angry at them or something like that. Would you agree with that, or how would you explain that?
Yeah, I agree with when you forgive, someone, it doesn't mean you have to hang around them, you have to have lunch with them, you don't have to, right, be around that energy. It just frees you from being a prisoner of your own mind, of
Hmm.
not being able to release and let go of what the course teaches in true forgiveness, that it's your projection. If, in other words, if you have a grievance or a judgment about someone, it's really teaching us that the whole world is our projection, and it's really happening in our minds. We're projecting. So if it's happening in our mind, we've made up not only the world, but we're making up all the people in the world. And we're giving our own interpretation. We're putting our own perception and interpretation on those people, when we could remember to recall that projection of what we're feeling. If we feel a grievance about someone, bring it back to our own minds and say, if the law of one says we really are one, whatever I'm thinking about another person is coming right back to me. If I am judging this person, no matter what this person appeared to do, think I even know how to judge, and assume I even know, you know, how to judge correctly. And I'm judging this person as evil, and we're one. Well, I'm kind of basically saying, well, I'm evil as well then. So
Wow.
what I want to do is see that person as whole, as innocent, not even as a person, overlook the errors they've made, and see nothing but the spirit, the Christ, you could call it the Christ, innocence, purity, where what they really are. And that's what you're saying about yourself then too. You're reminding yourself that's what you really are. And that's the course's version of forgiveness, is that, and this is, I know this is very different from what the world teaches, but basically says, you want to see that no one's really done anything, because it's your projection, it's your dream. The script is written. And so if we're having a problem, or we think if someone appears to do something to us, and that certainly we can have that experience, in this world where we can, appear to be attacked and things like that. It doesn't mean we're not going to take care of ourselves and be normal and, call the police if you have to. I mean, really be normal. But at the mind level, you can free yourself by thinking of the idea of this idea of that we're really all connected. We're all one mind. And what we think about others comes right back to ourselves.
Okay,
If we
let's
can
hold
let
that.
that go, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's really good. So let's hold that thought. We'll take a short break here. What's
sure.
the title of your book? Have you got it handy? Can you hold it up?
Yeah, the book where I talk about forgiveness a lot is called The Business of Forgiveness.
Just tilt it forward. It's a little, no, forward. That's it. There it is. So we
Okay.
don't get to shine on it. What a beautiful title. There it is. The Business of
Yep.
Forgiveness by
Yep.
Cindy Lora-Renard. Okay, hang on. We'll be right back after this short break.